Hello and welcome to episode 102 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined by Christian DeBlock and Mathias Altman-Kurosaki. And guys, you know why we're here. The news dropped. The inevitable finally happened. The polar bear has returned to the Flushing Zoo. Pete Alonso back with the Mets 2-year deal. Seemed like for the first time, it feels like, as a Met fan, a long time, the Mets did a great job playing out the market and getting a guy they wanted without overplaying their hand or doing anything else as far as, not what they were comfortable doing. So I think it's just an awesome deal overall to have him back. And, I just want to get your guys' thoughts on it, obviously. And Mathias, we'll start with you here. Just your thoughts on Pete coming back now.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, it felt like it was inevitable that he was coming back. I know last time we spoke, it had been rumored that he was negotiating with the Blue Jays. It was reported they were at the 10-yard line. It didn't end up happening. David Stearns, man, he's quite the baseball genius. I'll tell you that much because, apparently Alonso rejected an offer of 3 years and $85 million, but it was heavily deferred. But he was able to get him to be reasonable. 2 years, $54 million. It's a team-friendly contract. Say he does opt out after this year, he's getting $30 million this year. Say he opts out. Well, I mean, you could still go after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Maybe you try to bring back Alonso as the DH, or even if Alonso opts in, you could probably still try to get Guerrero. So it's a great contract for both sides, I think, really.
Yeah, when we talked, we thought it was just all posturing, and the idea that all these teams that were involved were not really involved, and that Boris was doing whatever he could to get a little more money for his client, which is totally fair. But yeah, it's the best thing ever in terms of both sides, because again, Alonso gets that $30 million AAV for the first year, and the Mets got a reasonable deal for 2 years, so no long-term commitment. Yeah, David Stearns, I echo everything you said there. It's wonderful that he was able to navigate that with so much emotion around Alonso and all the excitement that the fans had after what he did in the playoffs. So I think all around it's a great move for not only Pete, but certainly the Mets as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely echo everything you guys said. Obviously, just, if you're Alonso, right, it makes too much sense if you're going to want to build your stock back up to go to the place back to where you're familiar, a team that's obviously ready to win right now. You've had success in, the fan base loves you. It's nice to see that they were, able to get something done. I mean, I'm sure I don't know how he feels. Like you said, Christian, he's making $30 million this year. He's going to be the highest paid first baseman in baseball this season coming up. So he got that. I would say, as far as you're paying more, certainly than production wise, being the top first baseman in the league, but you're not hampered down a 4 or 5, 6 year plus deal. Like you said, your flexibility if you want to try and sign a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. next year or whatever. But more importantly, this lineup had a gaping hole in it, and that was as far as protection for Juan Soto, and you've done that now. You want to do that. That was probably, from what everyone said, no matter what, that's probably the biggest goal after they signed Soto, was to get that protection for him. And the Mets did a great job of letting the market play itself out. Not overplaying their hand, not overpaying for certainly was still a need, but just letting it come to them. And ultimately, I think they did a great job. I know it's being reported Cohen went down to Tampa, sat down with everybody, Alonso, Boris, they were able to get that done. Stearns as well. So, it's just another feather in the cap for this new regime on building a winner, but doing it in the right way and doing it in their way, and not just kind of bending over to certain people. And not for nothing, obviously they dealt with Boris already earlier this winter. You kind of did the bending with the 15-year contract to Juan Soto, as far as, what you gave him. You're almost giving him $1 billion. So, there's something to be said there too. They weren't, obviously Stearns had a number in mind and has, a value he has in Alonso, and didn't, move past that. And, I'm sure Pete is kicking himself because before Stearns got here, they offered him a nice long contract that he turned down. So, listen, it all depends, right? If he was Aaron Judge last year and hit 60 home runs betting on himself and cashed in, everyone would say how good of an idea it was. But, hey, that's kind of the business of it, right? And just happy he's back with the Mets. Kind of, it seems like where he's always belonged. And at least for this year, you'll have them anchoring behind Soto, or, we'll see how they configure the lineup. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But just a really nice cherry on top to what feels like just a tremendous offseason.
Yeah, and really, this is an A+ offseason. They've done basically everything we could have asked of them. I mean, they got Juan Soto. They brought back Sean Manaea. They signed Clay Holmes and Frankie Montas and AJ Minter. And, now they brought back Alonso. I mean, this is literally everything the fan base wanted. And, it really lengthens the lineup. You keep Mark Vientos at third base, so he's still an everyday player. But, I looked on Fangraphs, and 8 of the 9 projected starters, I guess if you include Marte, it's, 8 of those 9 projected starters are projected to have at least a 100 WRC plus. So you have 8 above average hitters in your starting 9. The one exception being Jose Siri, and he has potential to be, I think, an average to above average bat. So I mean, not a lot of teams can say they have that type of depth in their lineup.
Yeah, I mean, the lineup is just deepened even more with Alonso, and hopefully, you would think with the potential money he can get next year if he opts in, that there would be less pressure on him to, put up monster numbers, because it felt like that throughout the entire season. He really didn't have too many big moments in the regular season. Certainly, the consistency wasn't there, and then he turned it on in the postseason. So hopefully, that will, elevate his game back to the level we saw for so many years, to go along with everybody else that's in the mix. And then you consider, can Alvarez take a step forward? Can Vientos maybe take another step forward? So I think there's a lot of potential here for this lineup to be at the top of the game. And Alonso could be a very important piece in that, if he can, again, rekindle a lot of those big numbers he put up, in the first couple years of his career.
Yeah, no, and I think at the very least he's a guy that's going to hit 35 home runs, driving close to 100 runs. I think you'd like to see his RBI totals go up, and you think they will now. Obviously, with Soto probably hitting in front of him, that's just going to kind of happen by osmosis now. But you'd like to see the average high. I know he's career like 250 hitter, 249 or something like that. I think he could be a 280 hitter. I think he's a guy who could hit, be a 30 doubles, 30 homer guy if he wanted to. He was that more so at the beginning of his career. Obviously, he's gotten sold that a little bit more for power. But I don't think you could ask much better as far as, like you said, keeping Vientos at third base. I think that's huge as far as for his offense, keeping him comfortable. And you made a great point about Alvarez. I think he's going to be outside of the kind of the guys you expect. I think he's going to be an X factor for this year. If he can take a step forward, it's going to be huge for this offense, because especially you saw in the post towards the end of the regular season, and then especially in the postseason, I mean, both sides of the ball, he just really was a non-factor. Don't know how much the hand had something to do with that, or just fatigue in a long season, a young player not playing that much before. But if he could take a step forward, this really just becomes a really, really, really deep lineup. It should be a lot of fun. It's just weird to think about as far as with the Mets making these kind of moves and like not shooting themselves in the foot or kind of overextending themselves to get guys to want to be here. I think the fan base kind of did the talking at, Fan Fest or whatever. I know that's been a lot of talk about what happened there as far as what Cohen said and stuff like that. So however it happened. It's great. And I know I said it, the cherry on top was him. And I know we said we'd only talk about Alonso, but, if we're getting greedy, there's a couple guys out in San Diego that I know the beach is nice, but they may want to come to Flushing and hop on the Mets train. If they could, trade for a King or a Cease, I do think they need another arm in the rotation. I'd like them to do that before the deadline. I'd like them to do that, for the regular season. But if they can get either of those guys, I think that really would make it an absolutely perfect offseason. And then, really you can then. You're feeling really comfortable what you have, and then at the deadline you can go and get a reliever or two and something like that. You don't have to worry about getting a starter as well. I know it's greedy. I don't know, if the Padres are, at this point going to be asking a ton now, especially understanding that, a team like the Mets is, having the offseason they've had and what they're trying to do. Teams are going to try and ask for more, but I would love to see for something like that to get done right before, spring training here really starts. I think that would just be the absolute topper.
I mean, they have, especially with infielders, they have the depth to trade from. Right. So, yeah, maybe, I mean, Cease or King, either one of them would make a great addition. I mean, they'd probably go to the top of the rotation. King had the better season. Cease sort of has the longer track record. But either way, you can't go wrong. And yeah, I think getting another arm for the rotation is like the one last thing I would want. But I mean, it's not necessary. You don't necessarily need to do it, but it'd be one of those things where your rotation goes from probably middle of the pack to being, closer to top 10, I would say. And the one other thing I'll add about Alonso is that he's 26 home runs behind Darryl Strawberry for the franchise lead. So now that was one of the big things I was always thinking about during these negotiations is that if he does come back, he has a strong chance to break Strawberry's record. So, from there, you could talk about, maybe jersey retirement and all that, but he can really cement himself as a legend on this team this year.
Yeah, that'll be one of the special moments, probably, sometime in the summer, which it's going to be something to watch. But yeah, going back to the pitching, Cease is one that I would love to get in particular. I know the King negotiations and kind of the restructure of that deal a couple of weeks back. There was at least some ideas that would kind of take him off the market. If the Cease, price comes down a little bit, and again, with all the positional players we got that are, potentially available via trade, I think it makes a lot of sense to do. Because again, Cease is a frontline starter. He's got great stuff. He showed that last year. He showed that in Chicago before the trade. So it would be a really good add. And again, it's, I think, something that would be nice to have now versus, potentially something in July or August towards the back end of the season.
Yeah, no, agreed. And, personally for me, I don't love Frankie Montas. That was a signing. I kind of shook my head out a little bit seeing, the guys that were out there. But I mean, I kind of said the same thing about Severino and Manaea last year. And obviously you kind of just have to give Stearns a benefit of the doubt and hope kind of the same thing happens. It's a, kind of shorter term deal. You're hoping for lightning in a bottle there. Someone who's had success before and can be healthy, whatever. But I would love to see them get another arm. Like I said, if they could do that, that really would make me feel comfortable going into the season. Just especially too, if someone like Clay Holmes struggles, you could put him back in the bullpen and you don't really have to worry as much because you have that depth still. But it's good problems to have. We'll see what ends up happening. I feel like a team like the Mets now, San Diego might just be asking for, a little bit more than normal in general to try and just not see the Mets keep riding this wave. But it's great to just see them in on all this and clearly showing, obviously they've made a long-term investment with Soto, but still trying to build on what happened last year and win right now. I think it just continues to be, music to Mets fans' ears. But I guess I want to transition a little bit, I guess, to the lineup. Now you can start doing some configurations, the fun stuff. We can start to speculate there. We see different variations of it. I'm wondering, like, if there's any particular lineup that you guys like that you'd like to see. I don't see a world where you don't have Soto hitting 3-4, Soto Alonso hitting 3-4. I know I've seen some having Lindor, Soto going 1-2. To me, Alonso's the classic cleanup hitter. I've seen mocks with Nimmo in the cleanup spot. Vientos Alvarez, I don't love that. I like Pete sitting in the full hole and hopefully, Soto hitting right in front of him. But I'm curious to see what you guys think.
Yeah, I think the ideal is Lindor, Vientos, Soto, and Alonso in that order.
Vientos in the 2-hole, really?
I think he's got the qualities to do that. I'm trying to think of anybody else that would. I'd prefer Nimmo.
So I was going to say I'd Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso. And now I know you have two. Then you'd have two lefties stacked, sitting second, third. I guess that all depends on pitching and whatnot. But I guess it's, again, all good problems to have, right? That you can mix this up with them. So I keep going.
Yeah, I think Nimmo has got the track record to hit that high up and be, a guy that you can rely on to, potentially get Lindor in. He's got the ability to drive runs in, move the guy over, all the good qualities of a polished hitter. And again, hopefully his foot is, healed to the point where he's near his best to the start of the season, hopefully at 100%. But yeah, I wouldn't mind Nimmo being a little further down. Winker's obviously going to be, in that area behind Alonso. I think Alvarez at this point, just to keep pressure off him, is someone that should be more towards the bottom. But yeah, again, these, as you mentioned, good problems to have. But yeah, I'd be interested to see Vientos in the 2-hole personally. I think that'd be a cool little thing to watch for in the beginning of the season.
I mean, it's tough because on one hand, like Soto is the best hitter in the lineup. But personally, I'd have him bat second because he gets on base at one of the highest rates in the sport. And I want him up as many times as possible. So, I mean, personally, Lindor bats lead off, Soto bats second. I want Alonso batting behind Soto. So I'd put Alonso third, Vientos cleanup, and then Nimmo after that. I think Nimmo, especially after the year he had, I think he'd really benefit from hitting a little lower in the lineup. And he proved, though, I mean, his rate stats weren't that good, but he did drive in a career high in runs. So I think he could benefit well from maybe a full season being in the middle of the order.
That's a good point.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
And Mathias, I agree with you. I want a pair. I want Soto hitting in front of Alonso. I want that. And I do agree he's the best. So if Alonso's hitting third there, I like Vientos hitting cleanup more than I do hitting second personally. I think that's something Vientos would have to earn throughout the season a little bit for me still. But again, this is just still a really, really long lineup with Alonso hitting in the middle of it, whether it's, third or fourth. It really is incredible what, I think, a guy like Soto and them together now are going to just do. And, we forget, second in the MVP, Francisco Lindor, leadoff man, all world shortstop, best shortstop in the National League. Hitting at the top. So it's just, it's really just, it puts a smile on my face. I don't know how else to say that. They did what they had to do to keep this core intact. I don't know how much Lindor's kind of blessing or stamp of approval that we heard about too, saying he to bring Alonso back helped at all. But just, really, really exciting to see this core make a run at it here.
I think it's also interesting just thinking about last year that Lindor is now solidified himself as the leadoff hitter.
Sure.
For a while it was
100%.
kind of a who knows who's going to be the leadoff hitter, and then he stepped into that role. I think it was in late May, and the rest is history. Now we know start of the season that's our leadoff hitter. So I think that's such a blessing to have because, again, I think for a while we didn't know what it was going to be like there. And now we have, a great player and a great leader and a great hitter in that leadoff spot, which is so, so important.
Yeah, and if it felt like, in particular, Lindor's spot in the lineup, you couldn't figure out where to put him in. It seemed like Nimmo was never going to leave the leadoff spot, but Lindor becoming the leadoff hitter completely turned his season around. So I agree. Yeah, Lindor's definitely set in stone there. I will say, while I don't necessarily think Vientos should bat second to start the season, he did bat second a lot in the postseason, and he hit very well in the 2-hole. So I wouldn't be opposed to trying it there. I think he'd still really benefit from hitting behind Soto and Alonso. Gives him more opportunities to drive in runs, probably gives him more pitches to hit.
Yeah, great points. And kind of going from anchoring the middle of the lineup to filling out the back end of the roster and filling out the back end of our show. Nick Madrigal signed a deal with the Mets. Kind of feels like the Jose Iglesias kind of utility infielder, backup utility infielder type quadruple A. I know folks want to see Iglesias back. Necessarily the Mets don't have a backup shortstop unless it's Acuna, is on the opening day roster or whatever. There's reports the Mets offered Iglesias a 1-year deal, but he's looking for a multi-year deal. I don't know if that's happening. Probably not with the Mets. But another nice quadruple A kind of signing, back end depth, good little player that can kind of probably fill in at points, pinch run, things like that, defensive replacement in the end, gets on base at a decent clip. So, they're just doing everything as far as getting ready for spring here.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like 25 of the 26 roster spots are locked in. And now you have a bunch of guys fighting for that last one. I mean, Madrigal is on a split contract, so he could potentially go to the minors. He's only 28. He was hurt and kind of unproductive last year. So, I mean, it feels like we've been waiting on Madrigal to have a year where he breaks out. He was the 4th overall pick in his draft, but nothing has really materialized. But you have Madrigal, you have Jared Young, who they signed out of the KBO. You have Acuna, you have Beatty, and you have Mauricio, and you have all these guys, and I mean, throw Joey Meneses in there, I guess, too, but you have all these guys fighting for one roster spot. I think Acuna, Beatty, and Mauricio all have options, so they can begin the year in the minors. I don't know if Jared Young would accept an outright assignment. I don't know if Madrigal would accept an assignment, but it's definitely an interesting situation there. And I don't necessarily think Iglesias will come back. Unfortunately, I really want him to come back, but he's a little redundant, I would say. And I mean, he also had a 382 BABIP last year, so it's not like he would come back and hit 337 again. He doesn't need to, but I don't know. Maybe he wants an everyday role. Whether it be on a 1 year or 2 year deal. I just don't know if he's coming back.
Yeah, I think the more we talk about all these different names that are in contention for that last spot, the more I think it probably is in the best interest of the Mets to not bring him back.
Sure.
And I'm in agreement. I would love to have him back, have his vibes back. All of that is something that would be really nice to add on to what has, again, been a great offseason. But there's at least 3 guys you mentioned there that are really young or guys that are trying to still prove themselves at this level. And it'd be nice to see one of them get that opportunity. Again, it's probably not going to be every day. But I think you have to leave that spot open for one of those guys to flourish at some point this season. So I think I also want him, but the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, I think it is probably in the best interest of the team to unfortunately move on from him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As great as OMG was last year, that's not someone you're gonna, overpay or overextend to give a spot back to. He's a great veteran player. If it works, great. But like you said, there's a lot of young players vying for one spot here that I think the Mets are better off trying to give that to. So I think that's going to wrap everything up for this week. Great episode. Very excited for spring. Like you said, it seems like pretty much 25 of the 26 guys are locked in. So it's exciting to see these guys as they start rolling to camp now and things get going. So excited to see Alonso back in orange and blue. And obviously we'll catch you next week as far as spring training starting and everyone reporting to camp and the grainy videos of guys pitching and hitting and throwing and all that fun stuff. So baseball's right around the corner here and we can't wait. But as always, let's go Mets.